You're listening to The Stall and Stable Show, ideas for happy horsekeeping.
Well, hello again, listeners. Today's Tuesday, July 1st, and I am Helena Harris. I'm your host for The Stall and Stable Show, at least for this episode, and I want to thank you for tuning in again. I am still on break from school, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, I want to dive a little bit into horse behavior because that's going to be my focus from here on out. Horse behavior, however, doesn't exist in a vacuum. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about the basics of what motivates horse behavior, and then the how the environment factors into that, and a couple of other elements like their social lives and human handling, etc. So I'm just going to do a high-level overview of really what influences equine behavior in domestic situations. So listen in. Okay, here we are. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk about this stuff. Like I need more things to get me excited. Anyway, I just want to say again how glad I am that you're here and listening, and that the conversation about what's best for horses is underway, at least in the world of Helena. So we're going to talk about what motivates horse behavior. There are so many different facets to training and teaching and horse keeping, and it's huge and it can be overwhelming. So I'm going to try to do my best to digest what I know from the science and make it palatable to you so it's easy to understand. It's also, talking about this stuff also helps me internalize a lot of the science, and there is a lot. And it's really important to use some of these scientific terms. The language we use is really important for the way we train our horses and the way we manage them. So incorporating some scientific terms is important. So I'm going to do my best to use them where appropriate and then provide sort of simple explanations for what some of these terms are. There is an overarching theme here, and it's horse welfare through the understanding of horse behavior. And in order to understand horse behavior as we keep them on our farms or on a ranch or in our barns, that we understand the origins of their behavior. That's what we call natural horse behavior. You might have heard in the past, people refer to it as horses in the wild. But I'm going to use the term natural horse behavior because that's what we use in applied animal behavior science. Horse behavior, whether it is natural or whether it's behavior that we shape through our care, keeping, and training of horses, should always fit within the 5 freedoms of animal welfare. As a reminder, those 5 freedoms are the very basic that we owe to animals in our care. Those are freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, or disease, the freedom from fear and distress, and finally, the freedom to express natural behavior. Freedom from hunger and thirst means making sure that our horses have access to fresh, clean water and an appropriate diet. Freedom from discomfort means providing an appropriate environment, including shelter and comfortable resting areas. Freedom from pain, injury, or disease. We should all be familiar with this one. We want to prevent injury and disease as much as we can, but if we can't, then rapid diagnosis and treatment is essential. Nobody wants to call the vet, but there are times where we have to, and our animals deserve that. Freedom from fear and distress. That is our responsibility to ensure that the conditions they're in, the care, and their training avoids mental suffering. And then the freedom to express their natural behavior, we're going to talk about a little bit today. That's providing sufficient space for them, appropriate facilities, and companionship of the animal's own kind. So there is a lot to unpack there. There's no way I'm going to be able to get to it all, especially in one episode. But that is the umbrella under which all of my behavior work going forward will live. The difference between animal welfare and animal rights is that Animal welfare means that we want to ensure the animal's comfort. We want to be compassionate. We want to be fair within the work that they're doing for us. Sometimes that work is looking pretty out in a field. Sometimes that work is helping other human beings with emotional problems. Sometimes that work is jumping a meter 40 or setting the pace for regional hunter trials. It's right. It's all over the road. So we don't want to stop using horses. We don't want to say it's not right to use horses for fun. What we want to do is make sure that we respect their inherent needs. And that's my focus. So let's talk about natural horse behavior and what are the 6 primary behavior motivators for equines. And hold on. I got to open the door for a little orange kitty. Hang on. My production assistant has just arrived to work. Come on in. Okay. So 6 primary behavior motivators for horses. And when I use the word horses, it's just easy for me, but please understand that horses, equines, that includes horses, ponies, donkeys, minis, mules, whatever combination we can come up with. So the 6 primary behavior motivators: food, water, safety, comfort, companionship, and reproduction. So pretty much everything that a horse does is to secure one of those 6 things. Walking and grazing, that's to secure food. Walking, sniffing the air, being curious, more walking, that might be to secure water. Being alert, looking around, being agreeable to other horses, engaging in what we call affiliative behaviors or friendly behaviors with other horses. There's safety in numbers. So when you're friends with the other members of your herd, they're going to look out for you. Comfort, more walking, rolling, scratching, tail swishing some flies off of the belly. Those are all comfort-seeking behaviors. Companionship. Some horses will show diplomacy in certain situations. Diplomacy helps support companionship. Scratching another horse's withers. One horse being the lookout, or what we call the sentinel of a herd. Her job is to scan the horizon for danger. That behavior is serving a purpose for her companions, providing adequate personal space to other horses in a herd. Again, these are all behaviors that support companionship. Being a good teammate, basically. And then reproduction. We know that mares in heat and stallions, there are all sorts of dances and behaviors and behavior chains that attract a mate and ensure the propagation of the species through reproduction. Hey, good looking, come over here. Bring a bottle of wine and a pizza and we'll talk about things. Right? We know these things happen in human beings as well. So again, these are the 6 primary behavior motivators for horses: food, water, safety, comfort, companionship, and reproduction. So if you're looking at your horse and you're trying to figure out why he does something, good, bad, or indifferent, it's important to first think of the behavior as belonging to one of these 6 categories. Is your horse hungry or thirsty? Is your horse afraid or feeling unsafe? Is your horse uncomfortable? Does your horse need a friend? Or maybe your mare is in heat, or your stallion is distracted by nearby mares, or maybe even your gelding could be distracted by nearby mares. Why is it important to ask these questions and identify these primary behavior motivators? Because when you identify which of the 6 motivators are influencing your horse in any given moment, it becomes much, much easier to meet their needs in that moment. And when you meet their needs, they become much more cooperative. There's an association that happens. Instinctively, they realize that the human being who's with them can help meet their needs, and that builds trust. And so when we ask our horse to do things that are very unnatural for horses to do, we need their trust in order for them to comply. So to better understand your horse, you have to think like one. Traditionally, humans have trained horses through control, not cooperation. We use things like martingales and bits and bridles and ropes and ties to control the horse's body. And then we think about their mind second. So we control their body and their instincts through mechanical means. I promise you that cooperation is a much safer and more efficient way of, I don't even want to call it controlling, but managing the horse's behavior. Again, we want cooperation, not control. Please understand that I am not saying or preaching that we need to throw everything that we once knew about horse training out the window. We don't. We simply need to incorporate some different methods that work with horses' natural behavior, with their instincts, and then with their brains, the way their brains experience the world, the way their brains form memories, good ones versus bad ones, and then how we as humans want to tap into those memories for recall, for use later. That's learning. So cooperation is far more conducive to learning than control. Typically, control through methods like pressure and release, tie downs, confinement, the physical restriction of the horse's body and movement. That releases a cocktail of chemicals in the horse's brain that are not great. It doesn't really play nice with our long-term objectives. Certain things that we do with horses release a lot of cortisol into their blood. It activates, or these training methods activate the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It's a loop of stress hormones that causes the fight or flight response. And our horses have to consistently suppress the fight or flight response because we keep pushing the fight or flight button. We do that with spurs. We do that with whips. We do that with bats and crops and clucks. The cluck is an audible trigger. It's a stimulus that's designed to press the fight or flight button in a horse. It's what makes them go forward. It makes them go forward, but it also releases adrenaline and cortisol, which then have to be modulated in the horse's body. Their endocrine system, when exposed to chronic stress, as they are with many traditional training methods, when the horse is exposed to chronic stress and their bodies are just flooded with these stress hormones, their nervous system, their central nervous system, has to do something to stop that flood, to throw the emergency brakes on getting stuck in the HPA axis loop. That's when the parasympathetic nervous system comes into play. So if the sympathetic nervous system triggers the fight or flight response, that's the on switch. The parasympathetic nervous system is the off switch. So when the on switch is on too long in the horse's brain, the parasympathetic nervous system goes, hold on, this is too much. We can't deal with this because if these hormones keep flooding our system, we're going to die. So the parasympathetic nervous system slows things down and helps the horse's nervous system return to a state of homeostasis. In other words, it levels it out and brings it back to neutral. When a horse has too much cortisol or is stuck in an HPA axis or experiences some tension, it could be tension, it could be stress, it could be fight or flight. If they spook, or if the head goes up, or if they go rigid, or if they clench their jaw. There's all sorts of behaviors and postures that tell us when the horse is experiencing tension. The minute that tension is released, we get what's called a sympathetic surge resolution. That is when the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in and says, you better chill out or you're going to die. That, my friends, is the licking and chewing. Licking and chewing isn't necessarily a sign of relaxation as a lot of natural horsemanship trainers will have you believe. It is simply the end result of a chain of chemical reactions in the horse's brain that set it back to homeostasis. I'm going to get flamed for this, but I encourage you, if you want to learn more about it, I encourage you to do some research about the sympathetic surge resolution, and you'll get some ideas. There might even be some stuff on YouTube about it. Okay, so who knows how I ended up going down that rabbit hole. Circling back to the 6 primary behavior motivators: food, water, safety, comfort, companionship, and reproduction. We use food in positive reinforcement training because it is considered a primary behavior reinforcer. Anything that encourages more of a particular behavior is called a reinforcer, right? The horse expresses the behavior, we give them food, they say, I want more of that food, let me do the behavior again. They do the behavior that we want, we give them the food, their brain says once again, this keeps happening. I'm going to do that behavior again, and maybe I'll get the reward. So food is a primary natural behavior reinforcer. That's why we use it in all animal behavior science. That's why we use it in positive reinforcement training. We never want to use water as a reason for training, ever. We could even combine food and water if you want, but we don't typically walk around with a bucket of water as a behavior reinforcer when we're training. Safety. This is a big one and requires a podcast episode all by itself. But understanding that safety and feeling secure is a strong behavior motivator for horses. And for anyone who has a horse who is barn sour or herd bound, or you have a really hard time taking them away from the barn, especially by themselves, safety is a big reason for that. So understanding what makes a horse feel secure should be an important part of your training. Comfort. We can use comfort as a behavior reinforcer, especially in positive reinforcement training. Comfort could be anything from scratching behind the withers. It could be walking the horse from a hot, sunny spot into the shelter. It could be hosing them down. It could be letting them roll after a workout. It could be a massage. But the most common form of comfort used for training is through pressure and release. We put pressure on the horse's body in some way, and when the horse behaves in the way we want them to, we release that pressure. Why? Because the pressure creates discomfort, even if it's a small amount of discomfort. The horse seeks comfort, and in doing so, he moves his body in ways that approximate the behavior we're looking for. And when he hits on it, we release the pressure and he finds comfort. And once that little light bulb goes off in his head, we repeat that process until the behavior is refined and the pressure becomes less uncomfortable and transforms into a tactile cue. The next is companionship. And this falls into safety. They kind of mix, right? They overlap a little bit. But companionship is just that. It's more than just safety. It's the thing that we as humans seek out all the time. It's why we make friends. It's why we enter relationships. It's why we care for dogs and cats and birds and animals of species who are not human. We want the companionship that is essential to our mental health. Well, horses have the same need. So being among other horses, animals of the same species are referred to as conspecifics. So it's important for horses to be in the company of conspecifics. Yes, horses can make do with a goat or a chicken or a dog, but those animals don't take the place of other horses or other equines. So companionship is really important for their mental health. And if you want a horse to be able to learn how to jump a course, learn how to keep his wits about him when you're traveling to a big show, if you're trying to teach him or her a new skill or behavior, their mental health needs to be at the top of its game. It needs to be set, solid, strong. And companionship is an essential component of that mental health. And last but not least is reproduction. We do need to understand, especially with mares who come into estrus on a regular basis, reproduction, estrus is their body's way of preparing to have a baby or to reproduce. And that is extremely instinctual. That is so hardwired into who they are. Now, different mares will express different estrus behaviors. Some are very mellow. Some are more dynamic. Some are easier to manage. Some are more difficult to manage during estrus. It should not matter how their behavior changes during these cycles, but what should matter is that you recognize that this instinctive behavior, or that the way that they are expressing themselves, is connected to their reproductive behavior, and it's instinctive, and it's very difficult for them to control it. So here's where their welfare is affected by the way we understand their reproductive behavior. Many mares get temperamental, or they are very sensitive during estrus. And yet trainers refer to them as bitches, as marish, as spicy, as opinionated, as challenging, as quirky. So we use human language and human descriptors to explain horse behavior that really has nothing to do with the descriptors we've chosen. Those are human descriptors. This is where using scientific language and remembering that the horse is an animal and not a characterization of what we think horses are. Yes, they're characters. Yes, they have distinct personalities, and we can see them and interact with them as the characters that they are, but we can't forget the animals that they are as well. So I encourage you to lean a little bit on some scientific labeling that will help you better understand what's happening in your horse's mind in that moment they become challenging for you, especially when it comes to mares who are grossly misunderstood. I'm going to venture to say that mares and their behavior, whether in estrus or not, I encourage you to think about mare behavior in its scientific terms and to draw a line of comparison between the equine and the human female. Think of how you feel at certain times of the month. Think of how you would feel if you had to deal with boys or men constantly asking you out on a date or annoying you, and you just weren't attracted to them and they just keep hanging around you and bothering you. Or sometimes when you just want to curl up under a blanket with a pint of ice cream and Netflix and just like, leave me alone. I don't feel good. I need 48 hours away from the world. Horses can experience the same thing. Not in the same way that humans do, but similar, right? We need to anthropomorphize just a little bit so that we can empathize with what the animal is feeling. Because we're both mammals, because humans are mammals and horses are mammals, there are a lot of things we have in common. But we have to be aware of the line between human cognitive abilities and equine cognitive abilities. And sometimes that line is fine and fuzzy, and we're learning more every day about what horse brains are capable of. But many of the labels and descriptors that we use to describe unwanted behavior in horses falls well into the category of horses really, they can't think that way. They don't have the malice or the intent that the descriptor or that the label you're using implies. So that's a little bit of a fuzzy line. But I think especially for women, if you can relate a little bit of how you feel sometimes with how your mare might be feeling, you're more inclined to understand her and give her the space she needs to express those natural behaviors, especially as it comes to reproduction. And the same thing for stallions. I had a preconceived notion of what stallions were like before diving into natural horse behavior at Penn. I did a 15-page paper last semester on the fundamentals of horse behavior. And this paper covered everything from grazing behaviors to how many times a day does a horse experience bouts of hunger, how harems work. Is there really such a thing as an alpha mare and an alpha stallion? What do bachelor groups look like? What's a natal band? So that the origins of natural horse behavior, I had the opportunity to learn and read about stallions. And man, do a lot of us get it wrong. A little sneak peek is that stallions actually are great parents. They're good dads, and they're not really aggressive. In fact, free-ranging horses are very rarely aggressive, and they very rarely have aggressive physical conflict. The risk to their survival is just too great for that to be a part of their normal behavioral repertoire. Aggression and physical conflict happens in domestic situations. It happens when we confine them and we don't meet their needs. So in thinking about stallion behavior, especially reproductive behavior, there's a whole facet of what's important to the intact horse that we get wrong, and that we want to, again, maybe this is another episode that we can dive into stallion behavior, and that can give us a better insight. That can give us more information about how to keep them, how close to other mares we should keep them or not. Do they need to be separate? I mean, I don't know about you, but when I first started in horses gazillion years ago, I remember very clearly the advice, never turn your back on a stallion. And I, to this day, cling to that proverb, and I wonder if it's actually true. And I think the work that I'm going to be doing for my master's thesis will open a Pandora's box of stallion behavior. But again, it's one of those things that I think history has misinformed us. Circling back one more time to thinking about these 6 motivators of behavior, anytime we experience a horse doing something that's unwanted, the first thing we need to do is ask ourselves, why is this happening? Can I map my horse's behavior in this moment with one of these 6 needs? Food, water, safety, comfort, companionship, or reproduction. A note about comfort, that can be pain related. And I know that there's a lot of conversation and discussion online about misinterpreting unwanted horse behavior as being naughty or intentional or malicious when it's actually pain related. So comfort in the context of this episode and this discussion can also mean pain. So if you hop on your horse and you ask him to go forward and he's like, nope, hits the brakes, and something's unusual about that, he's usually a forward-going horse, we need to think about, wait a minute, the horse is stopping. His unwillingness to go forward is an unwanted behavior. Maybe we can map this unwanted behavior to the comfort motivator. By standing still, he avoids some sort of discomfort or pain that he associates with being ridden. And by standing still, that's a behavior, he is ensuring his comfort. So that's something to think about. The horse is a thinking, feeling, moving animal with emotions. Even though we give them names, we love them, we care for them, we get attached to them, and we often get frustrated by them. It's important to remember the animals that they are, and that we learn as much as we can about the distinct needs of their species. And when we do that, horse keeping, training, riding, that all is going to get a lot easier. And more fun for both of us. Okay. Well, I hope you got something out of that. In true Helena fashion, it was a little all over the road, but it certainly wasn't without passion. If you have questions, I might be a little bit more focused and able to answer them. Please feel free to reach out to me. We are shifting the Stall and Stable brand over to our parent company. We have an LLC. It is called the Who Harris Group. So you can find me at whoharris.com. My email is hharris@whoharris.com. Or you can also reach me at my Penn Vet email, hgharris@upenn.edu. That is going to be a wrap for this first discussion on horse behavior. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave me a review on your Apple Podcasts. If you didn't, send me an email. I'll see what I can fix. That's going to be a wrap for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it.